What's going on, guys? Episode 11, 11. I have on for this podcast one of my old friends, which at 29 is basically all your old friends because you're just fucking old. It seems relative to what it used to be. But one of my old friends from college, her boyfriend is a computer expert. We go into everything as far as graphics cards, right? AMD versus NVIDIA versus Intel, CPUs, graphics, the graphic card cooler systems, the Hyper 212 water coolers, um, keyboards, mice, other different types of peripherals, headsets, cases, everything else in between. So, chock full of information. Any kind of inconsistencies probably coming out of my mouth, just as an in case. Let me know if you guys have any issues with it. Let me know any questions. We're gonna have a follow up podcast with this guy in probably the next week or two. I had a blast talking to him. I had not met him before, but he also is working in banking, so we're gonna try and get into like finance, banking institutions, credit unions, everything else in between as far as that goes. And then on top of that, he's actually also a huge motorcycle guy, and so him and his girlfriend, my old friend, are both big bikers. So we're gonna get into that bikes. I have a motorcycle license. I've never really followed up with it, but hopefully, I can learn a little bit about that too. So stay tuned. If I don't see you guys before the new year, happy holidays, Merry Christmas if you celebrate, and be safe. Have a good one. Now, what's SNL Gaming? I gotta ask.
So SNL Gaming. Okay, where do I begin? So I guess I'll just sort of start with my gaming career, if you want to call it that. My gaming hobby, I should say. So my gaming hobby started so I got into computers when I was a kid because I wasn't allowed to have like a console like PlayStation. I think PlayStation 2 had just come out, and I just really, really wanted. That's like all I wanted to do is get one of those and just play it all the time.
Yeah.
And my parents weren't about that, but I did. We were at some store. We were at some store one day, and they had these joysticks on sale with a flight simulator. So it's kind of like you buy the joystick, you buy the flight simulator, and I'm like, hey, Dad, this is really cool. I want to be a pilot someday, so I need this. And he's like, okay. So that's part of what started it. Eventually, I subscribed to PC Gamer. I would read about building your own computer, the different spec lists for low, medium, high end builds, and they would have tutorials on how to do everything. So I'm like, at one point, my grandma needed a computer, so I'm like, well, I figured out how to build one, so I'll build one for her.
Nice.
Long story short, I ended up frying the whole motherboard when I put it together because I didn't use the standoff, so the whole thing shorted itself out and smoke and popping, and it wasn't good. So so that was my beginnings. That was when I was around maybe like 8th grade, around like 13, 14 years old, and the SNL Gaming thing started. Fast forward to I had just graduated high school, and a guy that I knew was like, "Oh, this Massive LAN, this Massive LAN thing's going on. If you want to check it out." So it's a LAN party. It's sponsored by Intel. It benefits charity. It's called Massive LAN. Anyhow, I started going to this Massive LAN thing with my brother, and I started going in 2009. John and I didn't really. I guess at the time, things are a little bit different now. Because of my sedentary lifestyle, but at the time, both of us had done. We had been heavily involved in athletics our whole life. I would say we were very fit. We were very athletic. Not your typical gamers. And at that time, LAN parties were still. I think things have changed now, but back then it was still more like it was pretty nerdy thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. I mean, you know what I mean. So we didn't really fit in 100%. So a couple years later, after I got a couple more of my friends to attend with me, and we're doing this stuff. So I came up with this acronym SNL Gaming, and SNL was kind of more of like almost like an inside joke. So it's for Sexy Never Left, because I was trying to figure a way to incorporate something that was kind of a little bit. I would almost say more like almost like bro culture, but in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way, just because of some of the comments about how we who are these guys that clearly don't maybe fit in, little bit different now, but at the time so we came up with this SNL Gaming Sexy Never Left thing, and it just kind of SNL Gaming took stuck all these years later. We're still kind of loosely using this. Our little group, our little gaming group uses that. So I don't know, it's probably about 30 of us, and that's what it is. So SNL Gaming.
Nice. Now, are you still playing like somewhat competitively with anything, or what were you actually first, right? Like, what were you playing competitively back then? Because I'm curious.
So I was never really playing competitively, and I'm probably, and sometimes I'm more competitive now than I was back then with things like Warzone, just because I'm just better now. I was a hardcore casual, if you will. You know what I mean? I knew about the games. I played some of these games, but I just kind of sucked. Like Adina, is really good at counter. Compared to me, she's great at CS:GO. I'm like trash at CS:GO. You know what I mean? So I really don't play any esports games. I'm horrible at League of Legends. But at the time, we were competing in this at Massive Land. They'd have these tournaments. So the only time I'd really compete like somewhat seriously would be at these tournaments they'd have. The one I remember, I think it was 2010 or 2011. They had an FPS Triathlon, which was like Unreal Tournament 2004, and a couple other older games from sort of that era. And they were considered even old at that time, but like everybody had them because it was just available on the network and that kind of thing. So the FPS Triathlon, we got second place, and that was like, for me, I was like, wow, I never thought I'd like do anything in gaming, and we got second place in this tournament. So that's kind of cool.
Nice.
But I don't know. I guess I was really never very competitive. Adina and I actually won with another one of our friends. They had one of these tournaments at Massive Land a couple years ago. So we won the PUBG tournament. So I guess that's probably the height of my gaming career. I won a PUBG tournament that was sponsored by Intel, which sounds a lot better than it really was, but that's what it was. About 200 people attend this Massive Land thing, though, this LAN party that happens twice a year. So it's not like nothing, but it's not like some kind of crazy insane tournament.
Now, where they
thousands of dollars
it?
on the line. That happens at the Erie County Fairgrounds.
Okay.
And we live in Erie County, New York, so it's in Orchard Park, New York. So if you know the Buffalo Bills are doing great right now. Yeah. So the Bills Stadium, the Erie County Fairgrounds is maybe like 5 minutes away from there.
Okay.
Roughly.
Is that do they put on like the fried fair, like all the fried foods, or like the beer fest and stuff, or is that like
that's just like every fair in any part of, I guess, rural America? That's just what it is, right? But they do, that does go on there too.
Okay. And you grew up in Buffalo, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so I'm actually, right now I live about 5 minutes from where I grew up. So I live in what's called Southern Erie County, so about 25 minutes south of Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
What we refer to it as the South Towns. People from this area. So you have the South Towns, you have the North Towns. A lot of people refer to Buffalo as just this entire area. So pretty much Erie County is Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm in that.
Even if you live outside of Erie County, you're Buffalo, right? But that's what it is.
Yeah. I think the Buffalo Bills fans are maybe not second, but like going through the same shit as like the Green Bay Packers fans. And so for me, like witnessing like what you guys go through with like the snow and stuff was like, holy shit! Like, why are you outside? Like, just diehard fans drinking heavily, smashing tables, throwing the dildo on the field against the Patriots. I was just blown away by the fans in Buffalo, like, because not only are they going hard with the Bills, but like the Buffalo Bandits, like the lacrosse team, everybody's going like ham. Like the stadium is packed. It was like incredible to go to like games. I never went to a baseball game, but it was always just like a great experience to like witness, like just how strong the fandom was.
I think a lot of it has to do with being in this. But Buffalo's a pretty unique area, so I haven't done a lot of traveling, but this is sort of what I've been told. Obviously I've gone down to New York City now many times, experienced Brooklyn, Manhattan, a lot of culture stuff. Buffalo is very blue collar, sort of this rural blue collar thing going on there with with our demographic. I mean, obviously there's not much to do in the winter months. We have a lot of cold and dreariness. I mean, Buffalo is one of the dreariest places to live. Adina complains about it all the time, but I try to downplay that. But I was just reading an article yesterday that like we're like number 2 next to like Portland or something. No, it's like out there way way out in the Northwest where they just get rain all the time and it's like always overcast. Like Buffalo is like second place to that. So we have cold, dreariness, and so what do people do? I guess they just, you know, a lot of drinking and eating pizza and chicken wings. So a lot of that. So I guess that permeates the Bills fandom quite a bit, especially when it comes to the tailgating and the partying, the pre-gaming out in our lots there.
Yeah, it's always a blast to see. I remember, like, I went to school at UB with Adina, and so it was every year like clockwork. It'd be like May, and I'd get like a sunburn on my neck, and then like a week later it would snow, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, it was always like the last week or two, we would always get like one last, just like, fuck you, winter's still here, bitch, and like just like get like 2-3 inches of snow, and you're just miserable, and like it's gone like 2 days later, but it's just that last like fuck you clap where. No, like winter is the boss here, and I was just without a doubt every year was just happening.
And I'm an all or nothing kind of guy, so I would prefer it to be, you know, you have like no snow, and then all of a sudden you have like 2 feet of snow, and it's cold, you know, and then at some point in March the sun comes out at the end of March and just everything, all the snow goes away, and now it's just summertime.
Yeah.
I'd enjoy that, but that's, you know, usually not the case.
Yeah. You get like the muddy season from like April, May, June a little bit, and then like July. Like I've came up in like the summertime and then early, you know, pre-September, and it's always, you know, hot as fuck, and it's like, what the fuck Buffalo is this? You know? It's going to like the lakes and stuff, and you know,
But I think there's a misconception that Buffalo is just in some sort of Arctic tundra. I mean, we live near, you know, all this fresh water where when you get the lake effect, you know, when the cold water comes across the lake, picks up all this moisture because the lake is warm. The lake actually keeps our climate a lot warmer. But then what happens is when the lake's not frozen, cold winds from, you know, the west or from Canada come down, pick up all that moisture, and they just dump it right next to the lake, and that's where we live. So that's where we get all this, like, you know, that's where it comes from. When you see these crazy videos in the news, it's like that. And even more crazy is that you can drive 20 minutes. Like there was a couple years ago when we had, you know, 4, 5, 6 feet of snow in some areas. You could drive 20, 30 minutes and have like this much snow.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
So,
but you guys always do like a good job of handling it. Like right now, New York City's getting, well, they're supposed to be getting crushed. Right now, probably 2 inches on the floor right now, max, maybe like an inch and a half. But the projection is for like 4 to 8 inches. And that's going to like just absolutely crush the city for, you know, a week or two. If we actually get 8 inches, the city's just, you know, it's going to be insane. Just no level of handling snow. And nobody knows how to drive in the snow.
It happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is.
So last week we were supposed to do the podcast. I'm just curious, what ended up being the problem with the computer? What'd you end up having to fix? And then
that was also kind of a saga because I was in the process of, I had just built a computer for my friend that I had some issues with. He's a pretty hardcore gamer, so he wanted to build. I said, okay, I'll do this for you. And my father is actually going to be doing some streaming now. He's a musician, plays the drums. He's going to be on Twitch doing some stuff with that. So I was helping people out. And at the same time, I was doing some upgrades on my build because I had just gotten a new CPU, again, shortages, stuff like that. So I was able to get my hands on something. And so, but the issue with my buddy's computer, I bought him an all-in-one cooler. The cooler started leaking on his graphics card. Luckily, the backplate took the brunt of took all of that. Basically, there was just a little pool about the size of a nickel. When I came back I walked away for 5 minutes, came back, and I'm like, what the hell, you know? But I wasn't so lucky. Mine, so this is 2 all-in-one coolers from 2 separate manufacturers. Mine, it was leaking right near the water block as where the tubes come out. There was fluid leaking out of there, a very slow leak, but there was enough that a couple drips got on my motherboard. I'm trying to start this thing. So ultimately I had to get a new motherboard. And then when I got once I got all that squared away, thing goes into what we call a boot loop. So it starts up and then it doesn't go to BIOS. It just basically resets. After 15 seconds, it just restarts. and it was stuck in this loop, and I couldn't figure it out. So I was getting really upset. And ultimately, and it was, I knew that this was probably the issue. I put my old CPU back in it, updated the BIOS, then it worked. Because AMD, these motherboard manufacturers, they have older, a lot of them, even the ones you buy today, they have older BIOSes that work with the old, Zen 2 chips, not with the Zen 3. So you have to update the BIOS so that they properly will, they'll work properly with the new Zen 3, the 5000 series CPUs.
When's the generation shift there with like the Zen 2, Zen 3?
So the Zen 2, so that, let me think about this. The Zen 3 chips, so the 5000 series AMD CPUs came out. I believe it was 3 months ago. I might have to check on that real quick. Just do a quick Google search here. I should probably know this. It gets confusing because nothing was available, so it was like,
when it comes out is not when people are actually getting it in hand.
Right. October 8th.
October 8th? Okay.
Yeah,
so it's this generation is the shift from Gen 2 to Gen 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Zen 3, I think it actually might be Zen 3 or Zen 2 Plus to Zen 3 is this generational shift.
Now, like, just to, I guess, kind of hard pivot. So I'm in the process of building it, building like a new PC myself. I'm right now running like a 760, so I'm wildly outdated. Like, I purchased it and it was not top of the line. I think the 10 series was coming out, the 1060, the 1070, and so I just did it because it runs, and I don't run anything on like max settings, but it's good enough. Now I'm looking at like the CPUs, and same issue, actually sourcing the thing, and the 5950 and the 5950 XT are out of stock everywhere. And then you look at the performance, and I realize that there's like a core differential of like 16 cores to 10 cores, and my dumbness breaking it down is basically like the more cores are better for more productivity tasks, right? Like for video editing or Excel, something to that extent. But how do they justify the 5900 being $900, the 5950 being $1,200, and the Intel being like $550 and competing like right there on par? Like I can't understand the hype train behind that.
So let me get the actual prices pulled up here, because you might see something listed at one price, but it's really not that price because of the scalpers and the inflation of those prices. So, okay, so the 5950X, which honestly for most people, this is going to be far more than you even need. It's a $550 part.
Okay.
Right. The 5950X, so at the highest level of the Ryzen processors, you have the 5950X. That is a 16-core, 32-thread processor. I mean, something that would have 5 years ago would have cost you probably at least a couple $1,000, right? That's an $800 part.
Yeah.
So the most expensive part is $800, and really, no one really needs a 5950X. I mean, I guess there are certain use cases for it, but I feel that you're starting to get into certain territory where maybe a Threadripper or something that's considered true high-end desktop processor is probably what you're looking for anyway. I would say for most use cases, the 5900 is the perfect price to performance ratio. You really wouldn't ever want to go more than that. And honestly, you can get a Ryzen 5 for $300 when they're in stock. But I mean, for $300. I mean, who really needs more than that? It's a 6-core, 12-thread, and they beat Intel in the single-core performance. So the other thing to look at is single-core performance, what most gamers look at, because most games are still not utilizing all these cores. So you get better performance out of something that can perform better in a single-threaded application. So what recently...
I need a little more of a breakdown in terms of the core aspect, in terms of, I guess, the video game. And if I have no idea, some other people probably do, but I need a little more in depth there. Sorry.
So what happens is when you have a program that's written, this programming language, it's written in a way that will utilize a certain number of, and this is actually getting a little bit out of my understanding, but it's utilizing a certain, let's call it like a lane. Like, right, so you have traffic there in New York City, right? So you have like a 10-lane highway versus like a 1-lane highway.
Okay.
Well, some games, it's like the way that they write the code, it's almost like you have the game can only accept. So say there's like a bunch of tolls. The game only has one toll booth open.
Okay.
Right. So even though you have an 8-lane highway, only one toll booth is open. So all those cars can only go through that one toll booth. So having that eight lanes is doing you no good at that area. It's what we call a bottleneck, right? So you're driving all this stuff into that one lane. But let's say, for example, that you allow traffic to drive very fast through that one lane. So instead of having to slow down to like 10 miles an hour, everyone's able to fly through that lane at like 60 miles per hour.
Okay.
Right. So even though you're still limited by that one toll booth, you're going through it at 60 miles an hour. So you can throw more traffic through that lane in a given hour. So I guess that's probably a good way to break it down and sort of like, without getting all technical about it. That's kind of what that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about better single core performance. When you're limited by your application to only just a couple threads, you can get more performance because you're maximizing the performance on just those couple threads. Because I mean, the 5900, which I have in my computer right now, is 12 core, 24 threads. So if my game is I play a lot of older games, they're only using one or two of those cores.
Yeah.
Those threads. So it's like I have all this extra stuff going on, but it can only utilize like this much.
Yeah.
Now,
is there any way to like override that or no? Or
no, because it's hard coded into the program itself. There's really no way to get around that.
Gotcha.
And it also has to do with the time. It takes more time to program something to utilize all those cores.
Okay.
One of my buddies is a software engineer, and I actually posed that question to him recently. I'm like, why can't they just magically there's all these cores available? Why can't it just use them for more performance? He said it has to do with the way it's programmed, and it's just more complicated. And when a lot of times you're going with the lowest common denominator. So you know that most people only have, let's say you're pretty much guaranteed that everyone has a 4-core. Right now, at the end of 2020, most people have at least a 4-core processor. So you have to kind of base all of your programming on that. And why are you going to do all this extra work for like that 5% of people that have an 8-core or a 12-core processor?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to spend the time and the money to do that.
Gotcha.
So
now with like the shortage aspect, I was actually going for a hike with one of my buddies who helped me build my first PC, and neither of us could come up with another graphics card creator outside of AMD and NVIDIA. Is there any whatever, there's Coke, Pepsi, is there any, Mr. Pibbs or, something to that extent? Like, is there a third, or is it just those two really?
There might be a third soon. So Intel is believe it or not, Intel is actually the biggest producer of if you look at all graphics cards in the whole world, Intel actually has the most that are being utilized in most computers. The reason why is because Intel still holds the market share for the most desktop CPUs that are installed, and most of those come with integrated graphics. Okay. So if you're running integrated graphics, you're probably running Intel. I mean, if you have an Intel chip, you got Intel. But Intel is about to get into the discrete market, so they're about to have their own discrete card to compete with AMD and NVIDIA. How well it will perform, when it will actually come out, because this happened years ago in the mid 2000s as well. It's kind of like we'll believe it when we see it, that kind of thing.
Now, do you think that they are competitive as far as like the chipset, or like you're obviously saying that the single core processor is far better, but like are they just getting smoked entirely in terms of like the chipsets that are currently coming out, or are they kind of like making gains, or is the lead increasing as far as AMD goes in comparison?
So if we're just talking about CPUs, for your listeners who might have to differentiate between the two. So obviously your CPU is sort of the brain, sort of the core of your computer. The GPU, or the graphics card, is what gives you like most of your gaming performance. Okay. So they're two separate things. So right now we're going to discuss the CPUs, the central processing unit. The CPU, when you compare Intel to AMD, Intel has kicked AMD's ass for like a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
So what has just happened with the 5000 series, one of the reasons why I was waiting to upgrade, AMD has now surpassed Intel, at least in the consumer desktop market, in performance. So you want the best of the best. Now you're going to buy AMD. Up until October, if you wanted that, you were buying Intel. Going back to like the mid to late 2000s. That's just what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Intel in that time, AMD just kind of just was trash. AMD was just trash. AMD just wasn't competitive. So Intel was giving you these little tiny incremental increases in performance, and the market was pretty much stagnant at that point.
Mm.
So prior to maybe like 2010, you were seeing these giant increases in performance with every refresh, with every new generation. That was what could be expected, what they refer to as Moore's Law. Every couple of years, performance was doubling, and transistor counts were doubling. And all of a sudden, it was like you're seeing these diminishing returns. And I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but going from 2000 to 2010, let's just say like a relatively high-end computer in the year 2000, a relatively high computer in 2010. The computer in 2010 was astronomically better than that computer from the year 2000. I mean, it was just so much better.
Mm-hmm.
A computer from the year 2010, like a higher-end, say gaming computer, versus now. I mean, the one from now is a lot better, but you could probably still get away with playing like indie games and some older titles on that computer. I mean, they're not going to run that well.
Yeah.
And you're definitely going to want to, you're going to want to upgrade, but it's like, I mean, think of a computer at the turn of the millennium, right? Yeah. I mean, it just, it's like you know what I mean? The performance, crazy difference.
Barely has color.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of where we are now. Hopefully this, now that AMD has sort of become competitive again, hopefully we'll see. There's a lot of talk that there's going to be another race. There's going to be this competition between AMD and Intel that gets really fierce. There's competition. The competition's going to heat up between AMD and NVIDIA. It's going to get really fierce. And ultimately, that's going to benefit the consumer, because when two companies compete for the best performance at the best price, the winner is ultimately the consumer. Yeah. And that hasn't happened it feels like it hasn't happened very well for almost 10 years now.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, seeing the performance benchmarks on like the 3060, which is like the baseline new graphics card, I mean, it's exciting as far as like the chipset goes, because, like what you're saying in terms of the competition, but the 3060 price point is like 3 and change, like high threes, basically get out the door with like, 4 and change. So to be able to smoke like a 2080, which is, almost the top of the line from the last generation, is insane. Like I'm never going to pay $1,600. I'm hoping to get out with like a semi-completed build close to $1,600. So I'm not buying the 3090, but I can only imagine like what the 3090 is capable of,
Yeah. I would say this about the 3090, because I could text you a picture. I just, in the other room, so I live with a couple guys that are gamers too at the house here. My good longtime buddy Vince, he has a 3090 Founders Edition that he just picked up from Best Buy. I'm actually getting notifications for cards going in stock right now. But anyway, so he picked up a 3090. He was able to get it from Best Buy. Just he kind of got lucky, right place, right time.
Nice.
Had to actually drive to Erie, Pennsylvania to pick it up. So spent 3 hours round trip going to pick it up. He paid retail, and I think he vastly overpaid for the price, because a 3090 gives you maybe on average 8 to 10 FPS more than a 3080, but yet costs double. I mean, it's a Halo product, but it's a very stupid buy if you're most consumers, or if you're just a gamer in general. It's a very silly thing to purchase. But I would say comparatively the 3080 is a pretty decent value if you can get it at retail.
Yeah. Now, out of the three, like let's just say you're an average person, like which way do you think you would go as far as like the 3060, 3070, 3080? Like, do you think, like, which one do you think is like the best dollar to value purchase?
So this is how I break it down. You have to look at what resolution you're going to be playing at, and at what frame rate you want to produce. That's really what it comes down to. I'm using a 4K display right now that'll do 144 hertz. Like, I am in the 1/10 of 1% of gamers that are doing that right now. Most people don't have that capability, which is fine. You don't need that. I would say the sweet spot is 1440p. But if you're gaming at 1440p, 3060 Ti or a 3070 is plenty enough in most games. Is plenty enough for most modern titles. You want to maybe a little bit higher frame rate, go with a 3080, but I wouldn't go any higher than that. I mean, buying a card that costs $1,000 or $1,500 is just, in this market, is just stupid, in my opinion.
No, you know, it's to each their own. I've been looking at like the performance of like the 3060, and I want to say that it's a great value. And then on top, you know, like I was saying, it's better than the 2080 according to like the benchmarks that I've seen so far. But then, you know, in terms of me, right, like my computer is probably built 2013, 2014, give or take. And, you know, to get 7 years out of computer, granted, you know, again, I'm running a 760. I'm not running, you know, insane frame rates. I'm not running insane resolutions, you know, the highest settings. But it's been working for 7 years. I just want longevity. So I'm kind of, I have a 3060 sitting next to me. I think I'm going to try and get rid of that, maybe trade for somebody who has a 3070 or try and figure that out somewhere in between. That's kind of my sweet spot. I think the $800-ish price tag on like the 3080 is just like a little out of my sweet spot, because to build a whole new computer, I don't want to go into the 2000s.
I would say, oh, Adina just got home, by the way.
All right.
There's light going on in there. So I would say the best answer to longevity is, because I've been doing this for another number of years, a 70 series card, or I think the 3060 Ti is close enough that you could pretty much put both of them in the same category. But you want longevity, spend $400 or $500 on that, not the top tier card, but like the next rung down, and use that card for 2 years. When the next generation comes out, sell that card and buy the next generation, because now you've spent less money than you would have spent on the flagship card, and you have better performance when the next generation comes out. You know what I mean? That's my opinion about longevity. I've been doing it for years. It makes the most sense. The only reason why I bought a 3080 is because I needed it for the 4K gaming. That was the deal breaker for me. Gotcha. And I decided that, you know, it was worth it in my use case.
Nice. Yeah, I actually saw on one of the Facebook groups that because there's so many different iterations of the 3060, 3070, whatever, where, you know, there's the Asus, there's the ROG, you know, all those kinds of things. And somebody was talking about I don't know if you know, one of the corporates allows you a trade-in policy where you can give them and then pay the difference between the two and get a free upgrade. Do you know who does that by any chance?
Yeah, EVGA does that. Yeah. I really like EVGA. They have great customer service, and I think they're the only one now. I think XFX is owned, which is AMD. I think XFX is owned by, I think it's an American company, but it's owned by a Chinese conglomerate, I'm pretty sure. But EVGA, to the best of my knowledge, is the only graphics card AIB that is basically is a US company.
What's AIB? Sorry.
So an AIB is it's a add-in board partner. So that means that they're basically buying the chips from NVIDIA and they're producing their own graphics cards. So they're getting a reference design from NVIDIA, or they're producing their own board design, and then they're basically selling sort of a souped-up version of what NVIDIA is offering. The line is getting a little bit more blurred, though, because NVIDIA is getting a lot more competitive with their own design. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think at some point, NVIDIA might decide that it's maybe not worth it to have AIBs anymore. You know, it could become like Apple, where they're just producing all their own stuff. I think they could probably do that now, but they have such a long-standing relationship with all these partners that they would burn so many bridges by letting them go.
What does EVGA and like Asus and those types of companies like bring to the table for, you know, NVIDIA as far as these chipsets go, though? Like I guess I'm missing that.
So they will come up with their own custom cooling solutions and their own board designs that allow you to exceed certain thresholds that NVIDIA has put in place on their own reference or founders editions cards. So, you know, like for example, they make an extreme edition 3080 that has 3 8-pin connectors and can boost a lot higher, can pull a lot more power out of your machine than the NVIDIA Founders Edition or the reference design from NVIDIA. So I guess there's value to the consumers in that regard. You know, you might like a cooler design. You might just might like the way a card looks
RGB
versus, yeah, RGB on everything now. So you might want the RGB, and you know, NVIDIA just has a very clean, basic, you know, looking design. So I guess it really, from a consumer standpoint, I guess it's like you'd have to decide what's worth it for you. But I think a lot of it just comes down to, you know, what's available in your market, right? Right now, it's like nothing, but you know.
Yeah, I got told to go fuck myself like 2 days ago. Like, I'm just trying, you know, like, the market is so tight at this point that it's like, you know, even as like a shoe flipper, it's like I can't touch the 3070s to save my life right now. My buddy goes, yeah, I got a 3070. I'll give you a retail. I was like, dude, if I can sell the 3060, I'll just give you the $50 on top, you know, because like that way he, you know, can make out. He texted me the other day going, yo, fuck, bro, I got a 3060. like, so now no 3060. And, you know, I put up the 3060 at 550, which everything on, for the NVIDIA 3060 Ti on eBay, every past sale is $650, right? And then you still got to pay taxes. You still got to pay shipping. So to put it up at $550, this guy tells me to go fuck myself. It calls me a scalper. And I'm like, that's a great price. Like if I'm looking, like, I end up...
If you have a 3060 Ti, I'm going to be in New York City this upcoming weekend. If you want to sell it to me for $550, I will buy that from you immediately for $550, right?
Yeah. No, it's just crazy, you know, like that. And I've started getting into like cards a little bit, like playing cards, not playing cards, like collectibles, like baseball and football, and the two communities, you know, everything has a submarket, right? And a lot of people trade cards, or like, you know, they get too many of, you know, one team or one player, and then they'll sell it. But like, God forbid you're a person selling, you know, sealed product or anything to that extent. And it's a very wild thing, because I see the whole page is, you know, 2070s. I saw a 2070 posted for $700, and I commented in mine for, again, $550. And my card's better than that card, and nobody says anything to that guy because it's used. And I get told to go fuck myself. And it's like, you're going to get more value for $150 less, and I'm the asshole. Like, it's, I don't know. It's a very interesting thing. I understand people's upset.
Well, you also have to understand your market, right? So you're selling baseball cards or sneakers. I don't know a lot about those markets, or that community, I should say. I don't know a lot about that community, but I would say that there's an expectation by that community that if you don't get that item right away, you can expect to buy it from someone else that got it, that was lucky enough to get it, and you're going to be paying them a huge markup on that item because they were able to get it and you weren't. And that's just what it is. And there's always, I feel like there's always been the exclusivity with these cards, with the sneakers, because they kind of realized that this was, you know, look at Supreme, for example. I mean, they figured out that they could create all this value by exclusivity and having very limited releases. Graphics cards and PC components were never like that before. They never really were meant to be like that. And the community is very hardcore. Like, you know, you're going to get a lot of hate if you're one of these people that's scalping these cards. I'm just saying, you know, if you're doing this and really trying to like use bots and buy 1 million of these cards, I mean, you're going to really be raked over the coals. Same thing if you're doing that with PlayStations and Xboxes. Like, you post a picture of yourself on Instagram with like a stack of PlayStation 5s, people are just going to be ripping you to shreds. And that's just how the gaming community is. They're like, look, this isn't like a collectible thing. It's not about that. It's about, I just want this piece of hardware so I can enjoy and play my games. And that's how people feel. And then now they see this influx of people that are in there just to profit, you know, just this profiteering that's going on. And they just hate that. They just hate that. A lot of people in the community just absolutely hate that. And, you know, to an extent, I don't like that either. I mean, I want to just, if I just didn't have to deal with any of this and just go into the store or go online, buy the card when it comes out, pay whatever the price is from the manufacturer, and just get the card. I would be completely happy with that. And most gamers, I would say almost all of them, wish that was the case.
Yeah.
So even if you're a gamer that's doing this, you're still kind of, I would say you're sort of like, you're just, you're becoming part of the problem, you know, if you will. So that's why it's different than sneakers or baseball cards or whatever other sort of like collectible, specialty collectible item. This is something that's near and dear to people's hearts, because ultimately it just allows them to do something else that they enjoy.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I you know, at the end of the day, I understand where the person's coming from, and so I don't take it to heart. I get, you know, I understand where it's coming from. My only counter thing is like, you know, you never know where the other person's kind of coming from. And for me, like, well, what am I supposed to do? If I sell it to somebody else at cost because I happen to touch it, I'm still going to get raked over the coals trying to buy the 3070 for my computer, you know? So, like, to make nothing extra and then, you know, pay extra on something else, it's like I was looking at the 3060 and then, you know, just between the two, it was like, you know what? Like, I can probably swing that little bit of extra money. And then, you know, if I can move the profit from the 3060 to the 3070 and everybody's copacetic, then great. And if I can give somebody a great price on the 3060, to be honest, like, so the 3060 that's sitting next to me, I'm giving it to this kid for like $500 because he said basically that he was asking for like a better price. I was like, 500 is pretty much as low as I can go. And he's like, dude, you know what? Like, I looked and that's like a phenomenal price. So, you know, I think the total payment is like $440. I'm probably going to get fucked in terms of trying to get the 3070. So hopefully they get some of those in stock. But it's like a high school kid and, you know, he just has his weekly paycheck or whatever. So he said on Friday, and his girlfriend was literally like, dude, that's too good of a price. He's trying to scam you. And I'm just like, no. Like, I'll send you PayPal, you know, goods and shipping, goods and services. And, you know, I'll videotape me packaging it and the whole nine. And that way, you know, this kid feels safe this coming Friday in 2 days. But, you know, it's one of those things where, for me, like, I just want people to, you know, feel comfortable in terms of purchasing from me, and then know that, yes, you're paying extra, but you're getting a good price. Like, that's always my sweet spot, personally.
Right. You want to say hi, Dina? Okay.
So now, in terms of, like, your setup, right? So you're using, like, the water coolers. So for me personally, like, I use the Hyper 212. And that's like obviously been, I mean, I'm purchasing another one for my new computer, RGB. And so is there like that much of a strong improvement with the water coolers that you think is worthwhile, the risk of, you know, what you went through in terms of the leaking that I'm somehow missing?
There's really not. I mean, I think it's an enthusiast. It's just an enthusiast thing, right? It's not necessary for like 99% of people. And even the other 1%, most of them just do it because it looks cool.
Yeah.
They just, and I'm sort of part of that too. I understand what the performance is, but also it just makes your case look cleaner, right? When you have an all-in-one cooler.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is for most people. You can also get, there is basically the difference between air and water, right? It's basically physics. You can hit that water cooler with a whole bunch more heat right away, and it gets dissipated. It takes very quickly. It takes water to heat up.
Okay.
It takes a long time for that water to heat up, where that air cooler will get hot right away. So the time it takes that cooler to reach a certain what's the word I'm looking for? But for the time it takes it to get to its maximum operating level is a lot. It takes a lot longer for the water cooler to heat up. So in theory, you're getting a lot of benefit from the water, because when you have these big spikes and you go to load up a game or something, you get a massive spike of frequency that has a lot of heat. That gets dissipated like very quickly along, you know, through, because it's just all this liquid in there, able to dissipate the heat a lot more efficiently in that regard. But honestly, at the end of the day, I mean, these things are meant to be running insanely hot. I mean, you're already putting an aftermarket cooler in there, so you're already cooling it better than what the manufacturer is telling you to do. I mean, for most people, does it really matter? You know, and if there's a catastrophic failure of a liquid cooler, now you're dealing with possibly hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of your equipment is destroyed in one way or another from that happen. I mean, it's rare that happens, but I did have two of them within a week. So
Yeah. Now with the water coolers, right? Like, is that just something that you're signing up in terms of the risk, or like will whoever, master cooler or whoever, will they cover leak damages, or like how does that work?
yeah, so they will to a certain extent. My issue could have been corrected. Like I had to spend $250 on a new motherboard. For me, what I ended up doing is I returned my cooler to wherever. I had one from Newegg, one from Amazon. I just returned them and got my money back for the cooler, but I should have held on to them and I could have gotten compensated by the motherboard manufacturer. The way I looked at it, it would have taken a long time for that all to happen, and it just wasn't worth my time.
Gotcha.
What I can do now is I can RMA my board, I can get a replacement board, and then I could sell it. And that, to me, that's going to take less time and effort. So that's ultimately what I decided to do.
Nice.
But yes, you can. EK was pretty good about it. Deep Cool, the two manufacturers I used, they were like, we're going to help you, but we do need you to send it to us with an RMA so we can take a look at what's going on here to find out, if that could have damaged your parts so that we can. And I don't know what that process looks like in its entirety, but they were willing to say, okay, we understand. We have a process to take care of you, but you have to follow this process. And I'm like, well, I returned it already. So what are you going to do? Can you get it from Amazon? I don't know. They're like, no, we need you to send it to us so that we can do our analysis. And I'm like, well, whatever. All right.
Yeah.
My loss for now. So,
yeah. So now so I've seen like a lot of computers where like they almost have like a piping system, right? Like I don't know what's the best way to like give like an analogy of like what it really looks like. Are those pipes are still water coolers, right? Like that's more like a built-in case kind of water cooler, or what are those?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but there are pipes that come off the heatsink, which are called heat pipes. I think maybe that's what you're referring to. If you can pull up like a picture of one and then show an example.
I don't know, like it almost looks like a chute, like it's like a really large like piping system throughout the actual thing. I don't know if this is. I'm not gonna be able to share this.
Do you have an example of like a device? Then I'll just Google that real quick.
Razer main gear would be like one. I just pulled it up in front of like my screen just so people can actually see it. But I've always been curious. Like it seems like it's like a built-in kind of cooling system, and they just have like all different tubing.
Oh yeah, so that's a custom built computer by Main Gear. That's just the Razer edition of their computer that they custom built. So that is what we would call it, a custom loop liquid cooling system, which, so you already know what my opinion is on all-in-one coolers. All-in-one costs you $100. A really good, air cooler will cost you about the same anyway. All-in-one coolers maybe go up to about $200. If you do a completely custom build, a completely custom liquid cooling loop, you can spend $200 on just the water block that goes on your CPU. So you can spend more money on that cooling solution. So if you're looking at that Main Gear computer, that Razer edition Main Gear, the cooling solution in that computer, plus the labor, because those are hard to do. All those tubes are hard tubes. They're like this hard acrylic, and you actually have to bend them. So you have to heat them up and bend them. So all that has to be done custom.
Yeah.
So you have someone that you're paying to do that, and all the hardware, all the fittings, all the water blocks. You're looking at a cooling solution that probably costs more than my computer that has a 5900X and a 3080. You know what I mean? It's like you probably have a couple grand worth of cooling in there alone.
That's insane.
That's what that is. And again, that's more for, honestly, a lot of it comes down to looks. You have these guys that are enthusiasts that just, it's going to cool better, but at the end of the day, you're probably not like gaining any benefit. Like if your CPU lasts for like a year longer, which they last for like, they could easily last for a decade or longer on just the basic air cooler. So you're cooling it, like you're doing a better job at cooling it. Yeah, you're probably overclocking it too. But it's like, at the end of the day, what are you really getting out of that? And I think most people, and some people might not want to admit this, but I think it's just, it looks friggin' awesome. It looks super badass, and I think that's what it is for most people. Yeah, it's better performance, but I mean, come on, you know?
Yeah, those builds are like absolutely insane. Like from me following like PC Master Race, I remember seeing one from like the U.S. Army where like they built out like a custom Hummer, right? And it was like one of like the mini like ITX type builds where it's like a much smaller case and everything's kind of all in one, this little thing. And they had this like little, I don't know, probably 1/64th, like almost like an RC truck, and they packed that thing to the gills with like everything. And it actually still worked as like an RC truck, which I guess is like not that difficult. But so then they have like this computer that was like, you know, it had all like the latest and greatest parts, yay big, and you could drive it around on top of it actually being a computer. And that's probably like the craziest post that like I saw on that subreddit. And I don't know, people just, the sky's the limit, right? Like you could spend whatever kind of money you want. You know, there's a lot of nice things, as my dad likes to say.
I mean, it's just like anything else, right? It's like there's guys that like they're just really into Star Wars, so they build an insane kind of like that. You know, the one that you were looking at, all the liquid cooling. They spend all this money, but it's like built inside of like a replica of like R2-D2.
Yeah.
You know, with like it like drives around and beeps and stuff. You know, stuff like, because people just, they're enthusiasts. You know, there's people that in Japan that build these huge mechs just because they're cool and they have the technological knowledge, not because you're really going to get any, you're not going to get much benefit out of it, but it does. It's almost like art, you know, there's something that you get out of it that's more than just the raw numbers. And I think a lot of people are into it for that reason.
Yeah, no, I mean, that totally makes sense. And, you know, at the end of the day, if people want to spend the money on it, that's on them, you know, like you know, can't judge how somebody else spends the dollar. So, I guess like the last, I think RAM is kind of like a moot point for like a lot of people. And so the last three things that I kind of want to go through is headset, not Razer, keyboard, I have a Razer, and then cases. So I'm really curious like what your take is in terms of like picking what you use and, you know, what else is kind of good on the market as far as that goes. In terms of cases, I'd like to preface with my friends, the two kids who are like really helping me with my build, are adamant that the ITX builds are like the way to go. The minis, the whatever. I like the mid towers. I have like the 330. I was told that's massive and clunky, and I go, all right, but if it's the same length, that table space is already taken. You know what I mean? So like it's a moot point. But so I'm curious what your take is in terms of like choosing a case.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, and I'm just gonna get. I always go on these tangents, but what I'm gonna say is I've gone from like a regular ATX to not really being big enough, to deciding that once hard drives went away, it's like you got these little solid state drives. What do you need all this extra space for? So I went from always doing like a regular mid-tower ATX down to the extreme of a mini ITX. Like this, what more do you need than this? All the way back up from, so I went from that to then a micro ATX. So mini ITX, the smallest, to a micro ATX, which is between, and then back to a regular ATX. I never go full ATX. I think those are just very, you know, way too much, and that, you know, there's a niche market for those. But I went from sort of like the standard to the smallest to the in between, back to the standard again. And what I can say is, you can get a perfectly small, I should say it that way, a perfectly compact ATX case in today's market that will not be that much bigger than a lot of these ITX and ATX cases that are being designed for more of like the high-end user, the gamer, if you will. Because what happens is they have to build these cases in a way that allows you to accommodate certain parts that makes the case bigger. So you end up having like a smaller motherboard, but the case is like almost the same size. Now, there are some ITX cases that are insanely tiny. And just like all the liquid cooling stuff, there's guys that can build an insane computer in just like smaller than a shoebox size. But that takes a lot of technical knowledge, and you have to do a lot of work to make sure because you have razor thin tolerances where you're just cramming everything in there and everything has to be just so. Those builds are awesome, but most of us that are going to build a mini ITX computer are not going to do that. We're not those guys. So I would say for now, stick with a smaller size mid ATX then you know you're basically going to be compatible with everything anyway. You're not going to have to spend more money on a smaller motherboard, even though it has less features and is smaller. I think it still makes sense to go with the standard, which is just a mid ATX.
What do you run?
That's just my take. I have a Fractal Design Meshify 2. I just upgraded because the graphics card I bought was so big. Yeah. I bought the 3080 Aorus, which is just massive. So you think it's big from just someone that knows graphics card. You think it's big, and then you get it, and you're like, this thing is friggin' huge. Yeah. So I had to take one of my fans out of my old case, which is what I would recommend you get, the Fractal Define Meshify C.
Okay.
I had to take one of the fans out, and when I was doing all this, when I had all these issues with my build, I just said, you know what, I got to tear everything out anyway. I'll just buy a bigger case that has a little bit more room so I can keep that front fan in there. But the Meshify Define C is really where you want to be at. Adina has a micro ATX case, and the Meshify C is the exact same size, maybe like a ½ inch taller. But other than that, it's the same size. And she has a micro ATX, not a mini ATX, which is the smallest, but a micro ATX. So.
Yeah, I was looking at I'm just going to pull it up for people to see. I was actually looking at the 510 Elite. I really like the two fans on like the front side. I personally am going to try and do like the RGB. It's nice and clean with like the black. It kind of looks like a fish tank, to be perfectly honest. But I just like it a lot. That's kind of what I had settled on. It's not one of the super large, almost backpack or jetpack looking cases. Some of the ones that I've seen look almost like a Transformers helmet and crazy shit like that, and some of them are gigantic, but that's kind of me trying to hit a sweet spot.
What are you looking at again?
The 510 Elite, the NZXT 510 Elite.
I think this is the one Oh, yeah, the 510 Elite it's a very classic NZXT design. It's a beautiful case. NZXT has some great products and some very great designs aesthetically. The problem with this case is that it is choked off for air. And I wouldn't recommend this case because of that reason. Unless they make like a mesh front panel version now, which you'd have to check on that. But it's probably, all the pictures I'm looking at are glass.
Yeah.
And what happens is you have where's your air coming from? Right? So you have these fans in the front of a case that has glass in front of it.
Yeah.
It's like if it's hot out and you put a fan in your window, but then you close the window and put the fan there and expect to have airflow, that's what you're doing with that case. And unfortunately, it's just like one of those things, just like RGB, that sort of permeated the custom, like the computer gaming industry for a while, ever since like about mid 2000s. And now that's starting to change, where the manufacturers are starting to realize that people do want good thermals, so they're putting mesh front panels on everything. The Define C from Fractal is one of the first cases that really excelled at that, with a more modern case design. But anything you get something with a mesh front panel, because you're going to have great airflow. Just my recommendation, really get whatever you want, but just don't get something that is completely sealed off from air, especially when it has fans in the front, because it's like, where are those fans getting air from?
Yeah.
This little tiny slit, they're getting air from this little tiny slit on the side.
That's what I'm running right now with the 330.
It's like, get something with decent airflow. Because the other thing about good airflow is that you will eliminate the need for ramping up those fan speeds. So one of the reasons why I went with the high airflow case is because I found out that having really great airflow can also have another effect, which is very quiet operation. You think, well, wouldn't a closed off case with more dampening and stuff give you better noise dampening? And that's actually not the case, because if you have a very well designed case that has good airflow, you can get high quality fans that run at lower speeds, and then you don't get all this fan noise. So you actually get better airflow, and you get quieter operation out of a case that has mesh front panels and very good thermal setup. So that would be my recommendation. You still get whatever you want and think looks cool, but that's my take on cases. So, and anyone that's listening, I would say, if you're really thinking about doing your own build, keep keep thermals in mind, and really try to look for something that has an open a mesh front panel, because you're never going to go wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I mean it's not something that I like took into consideration. Mine has like this whole front plate, and it has like, again, it's a slit, and then it has 3 fans. But again, I can't even see the fans. But then on top of that, what airflow is coming in? So it's definitely a great point. So I'll have to kind of go back to the drawing board, which whatever, we'll try and figure out prices. Again.
If you want a great case for what you're trying to do with your RGB setup, because that's actually what my buddy just bought. It is I think it's from Fantex. They're all out of stock right now because Gamers Nexus. I mean, you want to talk about some insane in-depth. I mean, you can hardly listen to them because it's so in-depth. But this is one of their top recommendations, and it still would look good, I think, for your use case. It's the Fantex Eclipse P500A. Okay,
let's pull that up. Yeah,
you can get it in white or black, and you can get it with or without the RGB fans too. So you want a blackout case where you don't have all this flashy RGB going on, you buy that one. You want the RGB, you can get it with the RGB fans for not that much more extra. So I think that's an amazing case. If not that case though, something from like Fractal's Meshify series those are amazing cases.
Nice. Yeah, no, the Fantex definitely, it checks that box of just, wanting to have something nice and aesthetic. I was kind of salty that I bought the white case that I have, and then, there's no RGB, and, there's no color to it. It's very plain, but it's like, it's not quite, loud enough for my own taste, and yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at. What are you running right now for headset and for keyboard? Do you have the HyperX too?
Yeah, so I have the HyperX. What is it? The HyperX Cloud Flight S. I know it's a little bit more expensive than there's like 2 versions of it. I have the HyperX. Yeah, I have the HyperX Cloud Flight S. Honestly, it's on sale right now too. If you want to get it on Amazon, I don't know if you do affiliate links for any sort of benefit to your podcast, but
I haven't. But if you want to send yours, you can. I'll add it into the video.
I don't. Not yet. We'll see one day maybe. But yeah, $123.99. So $124. Originally, it's $160. I think that's an amazing value. But then again, the 7.1 is kind of unnecessary. There is a nice added feature though. If you get the S, you have these buttons on the side that you can control. And this, for example, is my mute button.
Okay.
There's a little dimple. Press that, and I can mute my mic. So that's kind of a cool feature. I don't believe that those things are on the standard Cloud Flight.
This is the regular Hyper.
It is. So the Cloud Flight, the wireless Cloud Flight, not the S, but the regular Cloud Flight, does have the mute button. I don't think you get these extra buttons that you can program, which I don't use anyway. So, and it's stereo. The 7.1 is kind of silly. So honestly, I would actually, if I was to buy it again, I would get the stereo version.
Any reason? Now, what's silly about the 7.1? I guess I don't know enough about audio too.
Because 7.1 is what they call virtualized 7.1, because you can't. 7.1 is when you have, speakers here, speakers here, speakers here. You're wearing a headset, so you're really only getting stereo anyway. So there's this software trickery that sort of tries to emulate that, but you look at what competitive gamers are doing. I mean, you're gonna want to use stereo anyway for competitive reasons. It's just better for localizing sound. If you hear footprints over here, that kind of thing, stereo is actually, from all the research I've done, it's better for your competitive, getting that competitive edge, if you want to call it that. So 7.1 on headphones has always been kind of like a silly feature in most people's opinions. So why pay extra for it? But honestly, if you can get this one for $130 or $125, make your own opinion. You're not going to go wrong either way. I like doing the wireless. I see you have. Is that the Cloud Alpha?
This is the Cloud 2s. The Cloud 2s.
Okay, that's what Adina has. Anything from that Cloud series is is amazing. Some of the best value you will get in headsets. I mean, the sound, the clarity of the microphone, just paying like $100 or whatever they cost is.
I think I got mine 50 on sale.
Yeah, I mean, pay $50 for that headset and you're like winning. You know what I mean? That's awesome. So you really don't have to get anything better. You know, in air quotes better, because in my opinion, it's one of the best you can buy anyway. And there's really no benefit of the only benefit of this this headset versus what you have is the wireless, which I've come to really like because I just don't like stuff on my neck and dragging and stuff. I don't use wireless anything else for my gaming setup, but I do like the wireless headset. And a lot of times I'm on Discord, I'll just walk away. My buddies will hear me. I go downstairs. They always joke, "Hey, he's making a sandwich again," or something like that. And I'll be like, "Oh yeah," and of course I'll hot mic because I'll forget to mute my mic. That kind of thing. But it's nice just being able to walk away and be like, "Hey, let me know when that let me know when the Warzone queue is. Let me know when we're dropping so I can run back upstairs or whatever." It's just. It's a nice little feature to have, and I would pay extra. I'd pay extra to have it. So,
now, what's the charging functionality behind it? Like, how do you charge?
So, you can plug it into a regular micro USB, or you can do wireless charging. They will sell you a wireless charger for it, but you can buy any like wireless phone charger or anything like that you buy on Amazon is compatible, any sort of wireless charger. Nice. So my buddy had a cheap, I don't know, it's probably like $15-20. Like little headset stand that also the platform is also a charging station. Nice. He didn't want it. He gave it to me. I'm like, I'll probably never use this. I got this headset, and now I just set it down on that. When I go to bed at night, it charges overnight, and I'm good to go. So, nice. Plus you get, I think, something like 16 hours or something crazy out of this thing. So
hopefully you're not playing that long.
Yeah, true.
All right. So we'll finish up the peripherals, right? So keyboard, mouse. What's the take?
Those are very subjective. Right now I'm running a Rocat. I don't know if it's pronounced Rocat, like rocket, or Rocat. It's ROCCAT, so I guess it's Rocket. But they have a little cat sort of saber-tooth thing as their logo. I actually never really used them before. I thought they were sort of a B-tier brand, but I'm using the Rocket Crone Pure Ultra. And the reason why I bought this mouse is because it's one of the ultralight mice. So depending on what you're into, I kind of really do like the very light mice. I have for a long time I was using a Logitech what is this here? Stuck down below with all my cords. G500, which actually has the ability. You have the ability of actually adding weight or taking them out of that mouse. But I've always really liked Logitech. I've never been a huge fan of Razer, even though my first real gaming mouse was a Razer Copperhead back in, again, this is like going back to the mid 2000s. But this particular mouse has a better ergonomic feel to it, and it's very lightweight. But again, it's all subjective. Guys that grow up using a certain mouse will gravitate towards a similar mouse for their whole life because that's just what they're used to using. And it applies to mouse and keyboard. So whatever you end up getting used to is kind of where you're going to be at. I don't think there's much benefit to mice, the mouse or keyboard in terms of gaming. If you have a decent one and you like the way it feels, then you're good. You know what I mean? You don't have to get super technical. It's not like a graphics card where you're getting any measurable performance difference. I'm using for my keyboard, I'm actually using a Microsoft Sidewinder. Is this the Microsoft Sidewinder X6 keyboard? So go on Amazon right now and look this up because you won't be able to probably find one for under like $400. It's got kind of a cult following, but it has a detachable. So if you end up finding one of those at like a flea market or something, especially new in box, hit me up. I'll buy it off you.
Newest 505. It's wild. No, so what's so special about it? It's the detachable numpad, I'm assuming.
It's a very high. It's a very high-end keyboard for what it is. At the time it came out, like back in 2008 or something like that, it was a very high-end keyboard for what it was at the time. Now we have everything is mechanical switches, RGB, all this stuff. This keyboard has a low profile design, and it uses your standard what are they called? Like your standards, like what you'd have like on an office computer, like the membrane keyboard, membrane keys. So I just like the way it feels. I grew up using it. I like the low profile. I like the feel of the membrane keys versus the new RGB, or I'm sorry, the mechanical switches that everyone's doing now on the gaming keyboards. I just don't like the way the mechanical switches feel. You have to press them down a lot, even though they engage really quick. They have these long key presses and they stick out a lot, and I just find them very uncomfortable. So I will take comfort over performance as long as there's really no performance difference to begin with. You know, I think some of the gaming peripherals, the keyboards, mice, I think there's some gimmicky stuff that goes on with those things where, you know, take that extra money, buy a better video card. That's what I would say. You could get a used keyboard for like $1 at like a flea market or a thrift store, and it would probably suit you very well for all your gaming, you know, needs. Yeah. What it is, my opinion.
Yeah. No, I made the switch to the mechanical keyboard. I like it. I just have like the basic Razer one from, you know, again, 7 years ago. They probably don't even make it anymore. But, you know, there's definitely something nice about, again, it's whatever you're used to. So like those digital keyboards, I can't type on anymore. But when I first started with mechanical, I was sitting there and it was like, wait, you just can't find the keys, you know, without actually like having to eyeball it. So I had to like relearn how to type on it and then play games on it and, you know, everything. So it definitely is that time consuming aspect where, you know, being used to something is going to be more beneficial than not.
What I would say about the keyboard, because this will make a difference. If you have that Microsoft, the Cyberrunner X6 pulled up, you see that it has like a detachable number pad. You can actually remove that. I have always removed that number pad. I took it off, and I didn't even realize that was a thing. So it's called a 10 less keyboard. When you don't have that extra number pad, it's called a 10 less. So, and they actually make even a smaller version of that doesn't have the arrows and the delete and home, page up, those keys. I think those are still useful. So again, diminishing returns. But I would say if you're gaming, especially if you're doing first-person shooters, get a 10 less keyboard because you're going to have so much more space for your mouse movements and stuff like that. You're going to have a massive area for your mouse, and you're not going to have the keyboard taking up this extra, you know, 4 inches on your desk for something that you're never going to use for that purpose. That being said, for, you know, people that are listening, they're going to be building a computer probably for gaming. One thing you should start doing if you're playing first-person shooters is lowering your DPI. They have these mice now that you can move them like 2 millimeters, and your character will turn around like 3 times because they're so sensitive. Because how do you really rate a mouse? How do you look better than the competition? You increase your DPI. DPI stands for dots per inch. So when you increase DPI, you can put it on a shelf next to another one and say, well, this one has 2400 DPI and this one has 4800 DPI. Obviously, that one has more DPI. I'm just Joe consumer. That one's got more DPI. It must be better. It's just a higher number, you know. That's a lot of marketing. You know what I mean? It's mostly marketing, because when you have a mouse that when you have it set up where it's so sensitive that you're doing something like 5000 DPI or in that realm, it's just so sensitive, and then you have to adjust your sensitivity in game, and even with, you know, in-game sensitivity. My point is, lower your sensitivities. If you want to be better at getting headshots and being very precise with your aiming, lower your sensitivity, lower your DPI, and lower your in-game sliders to get your effective sensitivity. And there's a lot of calculators online. You can figure out what your effective, you know, your effective sensitivity is. But the easiest way to do it, if you're in a game, you're first-person shooter, whatever, turn your character around, like do a 360 and see how long it takes your mouse to travel across your mouse pad to get 1 revolution, to do a complete 180. And if you're moving like half an inch and you're going a full 360, your sensitivity is way too high. But that's how you can just go into a game and feel. It's a lot of it, like what I do is feel. That's how I get my feel for, is this too sensitive or am I in a good spot? And that's a great way to do it without getting super technical. But you want to have less sensitivity to get a more precise shot. if you're playing Call of Duty or Counter-Strike or something like that. You look at the pro level, and they all have I don't know, Kenny S, if he's still around, like those guys, they're running like 600 to 800 DPS, and you can look up their in-game settings online, but lower sensitivity allows much more precision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I struggled with, where like playing on console, to be good, you had to be doing 8 or 9 in terms of like sensitivity for like Gears of War or Halo and stuff like that, because you couldn't make that turn any quicker, right? So like you had to be good on those higher sensitivities. And so I try to like bring that into shooting games on this, and it's like, no, it's totally different. I mean, I've done decently in terms of shooting games on this. I'm definitely better relative to other people on console, just time spent and learning how to do it as a kid. But yeah, it's definitely something that I struggled in terms of like transitioning from console to this, where at first it was like, fuck, I'm fucking terrible at these things. Yeah.
And it's different on console because you have aim assist. So you want to be able to flick around really quickly. You want to do these small movements really fast. That gives you an edge, because the auto aim or the aim assist is then getting you on target. So as long as you're able to get in that general direction faster, your aim assist is helping you just get on target.
Yeah.
I mean, Call of Duty is a great example of this, because at the pro level, you still have pros with controllers on average will beat the guys with mouse and keyboard, which is not usually the case in first-person shooters, but it's because of the way the aim assist works. You're able to make these rapid movements, but then get on target very quickly, opposed to using the mouse and keyboard, which you have to take longer swipes because there's no aim assist. Your hand and arm is the aim assist. So, that's what it is. So just be aware of that, because I never knew that for the longest time. I just thought higher sensitivity is like usually better, and then I was just missing stuff all the time when I was shooting at guys' heads.
Yeah,
what it was.
And now you're winning Intel tournaments, so clearly you're doing something right.
Right. Well, that was mostly camping, and if you ever played PUBG, you know how that goes.
No, so to be honest, so PUBG kind of missed me, because I tried playing it too early on, and it was glitchy, and that was my like first experience, and it was just like, all right, I'm not gonna bother with this. And then Fortnite came out, and I had fun with Fortnite, and it was like polished. Although I bought like the beta, and I bought it for like the zombie mode, and a lot of people don't even know that exists. Now Fortnite I can't even touch the game without just getting built on and whatever. So now I've kind of switched over to Warzone a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Fortnite, you'll be able to run on your system though without any problems. So if you're just playing Fortnite, and that's the other thing I think it's worth mentioning to the people that are going to listen to this. If you're playing games like Fortnite or League of Legends or even really CSGO, you don't need a 3080 to be able to be extremely competitive, to get great frame rates at those games. Esports games are optimized for the lowest common denominator. That's just what it is. Cyberpunk, completely different story. We still probably need a weighted generation to get really great performance for that game, no matter what you buy.
Yeah,
so.
I've seen so many problems with people trying to play Cyberpunk where it's just like, all right, I'm not even going to touch it.
and if you're competitive, the hardware is only going to make you so good. It can help. It can give you a competitive advantage, but ultimately, you just have to practice and get good at that game. And I never wanted to do that for most games, so that's why I was never really that great at like Counter-Strike, for example. But that's ultimately what it takes.
Practice.
just like everything else.
Yeah. That's all I got as far as questions go. You have any for me?
I don't know. I didn't really think of any going in. I would say, I guess I would ask you, if you don't sell that graphics card, I'll buy it off you when I come down this weekend. But other than that, I'm just I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
It's all good. I appreciate the time, man. This was a lot of fun.
Definitely. I mean, I'd be down to do something like this again in the future. Maybe we'll see what happens when the graphics card market settles down and we have some new stuff on the horizon. One thing about PC gaming that I've I don't know if I enjoy it because it becomes kind of almost like an addiction, but it's always looking forward to the next best thing because there's always, no matter when you build your setup, there's always something like new and better that's going to be coming out within probably about 12 months. So that's what it is for me. That's one of the things I follow and something I enjoy. So, you know, if you want to do this again in the future, we'll probably be talking about, you know, what's available now, and then also like what's on the horizon for something to look out for in the future. If maybe you're saving a little bit more money and you want to wait a couple more months, right?
It's some kind of an upgrade. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the game plan is to just kind of have people on, like anybody that, you know, I'm just trying to talk to people that I find interesting. So, you know, with you, as far as computers go, it's relevant, hyper relevant, right? So it was great. I had a lot of fun. This is super interesting.
Cool. And I also want to, one last thing, I do work for a credit union, and there's a lot of things that people don't know about just general banking and, you know, what a credit union is, how credit unions operate, and just what that relationship looks like for someone that just goes into a bank and has an account, and what's happening behind the scenes. How are they making money? What to look out for as far as like scams and stuff, because that's been a hot button issue for us lately with people getting taken advantage of by scams. So, you know, at some point in the future, maybe we could talk about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we could hash that in, you know, like the next week or two. I try and keep it to about our time frame that we're at right now, which is like an hour 20, which flew by. I gotta do dinner with my girlfriend at 7, so she's gonna not cut my head off. But dude, I mean, honestly, if you want to run it back in like a week or two and just do credit stuff, I'm down. You know.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, just you have my contact information. Let me know.
All right,
good stuff.